Does this sound like you? You're feeling drained, like no matter how much sleep you get, you're still exhausted. Mornings roll around, and instead of waking up excited to plan your wedding, you're dreading another day of decisions and opinions. What used to feel like fun and anticipation now feels more like a heavy, never-ending chore with an endless checklist. The excitement from your engagement seems to have disappeared, leaving you feeling disillusioned or just wanting for it to all be over. Maybe you're noticing more tension in your relationships. Little wedding issues are turning into big arguments with your fiancé. You're snapping over things that never used to bother you. You're turning into someone you barely recognise. If any of this sounds familiar, you might be dealing with wedding planning burnout. The first thing you need to know is that you're not alone. And the second thing is that I'm here to help you. In today's episode, I'm going to teach you about why wedding burnout happens and how to spot it early on. I'll also share some strategies and practical tips to help you regain control of the planning process again. And if all else fails, there's one last, albeit extreme option that you could take. Either way, I've got you covered. And by the end, you're going to have at least a couple of action points to get started on, a vision for how you can start to get unstuck, because I want to help you to turn this situation around and take you from deep wedding planning stress to freaking joyful rainbows, flowers, and unicorns again. Let's get stuck into it. Unbridely is a community of pro-wedding vendors who believe in freedom and integrity in weddings, giving you options, solutions, tips and tricks to create the experience and memories that you and your fiancé really want and deserve. Because we believe that weddings are a team sport. With how-tos, stories and interviews with recently married couples, we find out what went right and what they'd change if they could go back and do it all over again. I'm Camille, and welcome to the Unbridely podcast. I should have mentioned at the outset that in this episode, I'm assuming that the stress you're feeling is not related to any concerns about marriage or your choice of life partner. If you suspect that it might be linked, this would be something that you'd need to explore deeper with a medical professional in a safe and respectful environment. So I would encourage you to really make sure where your reluctance is coming from first. Are you having doubts about your fiancé, about marriage, or about the timing? Don't sit on that. It's crucial that you address it as soon as possible. And if you're in a compromised situation or feel unsafe, make sure that you take the extra precautions you need. I'll add some links in the show notes, but also let your close family or friends in on how you're feeling so they can support you. And also, wedding planning burnout might be a smokescreen for other health issues that may be lurking just beneath the surface. So make sure that you take the signs seriously and that you take the steps to get the help that you need. So the first part I want to share is what wedding planning burnout can look like in everyday life. We want to recognize what's really going on here. And one of the first symptoms, if you like, of burnout is that constant fatigue and low energy. So feeling perpetually tired, lacking enthusiasm, not just in one area, but quite often in many, and struggling to find energy for everyday activities or wedding tasks. So as I said at the start, if you wake up exhausted despite a good night's sleep, or you feel drained after doing just simple things, these might be an indicator of burnout. The second sign is a loss of excitement and joy. If you were once thrilled about wedding planning and now you're feeling indifferent or even dreading it, and if you're not looking forward to discussing your wedding or you find it hard to get excited about the things that you once cared about, you might be looking at burnout. The third sign is increased irritability and emotional outbursts. This is when you're becoming easily frustrated or upset over tiny things related to your wedding. Like when a bridesmaid says that she can't make it to a certain event, a certain appointment, and you lose your shit over it. Disproportional responses. If you notice frequent arguments with your fiancé, heightened sensitivity to comments and opinions from others, this could also be a symptom of burnout. Symptom number 4 is avoidance and procrastination. And I know a lot of you fall into this category. So delaying wedding tasks, avoiding planning sessions, feeling overwhelmed generally by the thought of planning. So you just, push it back, but it's still there. This might be you if you keep pushing off wedding decisions or find yourself avoiding discussions about the wedding. Symptom number 5 are physical symptoms of stress. So it could be related to a lot of other things, but if it's mainly the wedding that you're focusing on, then when you're experiencing your headaches, your muscle tension, you're not sleeping well at night, you have changes in your appetite, you can't eat or you want to eat all the time. If you're noticing physical stress reactions more frequently, especially when dealing with your wedding related tasks, there's a good chance that they're connected. It could be impacting your body in more ways than one. And by paying attention to these signs, you can recognize wedding planning burnout early so you can take some steps to address it, making sure you maintain your well-being and actually enjoy the planning as well as the big day. A lot of couples ask why. Why is it so hard? Why am I feeling burned out when it's something exciting for me and my fiancé? It's our big wedding. You know, we're dropping all this money. We're bringing all these people in from all over the country to celebrate us and our relationship and our future because we're so excited. Why are we then turning around a complete 180 degrees and going, can't be fucked? Really, at this stage, don't care. And I think it's important to realize that the average lead time from engagement to the wedding day or days is anywhere between 12 to 18 months. And less than 12 months is considered a fairly optimistic and at best condensed version of what a typical wedding planning timeline might look like. So registry or courthouse style marriages and elopements aside, planning a day with 30-ish or more guests should always be considered a marathon and not a sprint. And with anything that takes a decent amount of time, there are ebbs and flows. So one of the things that might impact your feelings about your wedding along the way are the very well-known expectations of what you should be doing versus the reality. So the unrealistic societal and self-imposed expectations, let's not leave that off the table as well. Sometimes we mistakenly believe because of movies, because of our sister, because of our friend from high school who did it this certain way, that there is a perfect way to do it and there is a pressure to create the perfect day. Which, if you've listened to any of my other episodes, I hope you know how unattainable that is. Another reason could be information overload. Because there are now an overwhelming amount of choices and information, people closest to you are going to be giving you all of their ideas, which has always been the way from the start of time. But in addition to that, now you have social media and all the wonders of the internet available to you pretty much 24/7 with people with ideas like me saying you should do it this way, you should do it that way. And sometimes even that, having so much available is really hard to come to terms with and really hard to sift through. Where's the bullshit and where's the gold here? And it can perpetuate an analysis paralysis. It's endless Pinterest boards and vendor options. It can be a lot, and that in itself can make you want to turn away, hide away, and bury your head in the sand. Another reason could be budget constraints. Frequently, there is a lot of financial stress with weddings, and there are hidden costs. And this is not to mean that, vendors and venues and everyone are sneakily just hiding these things behind their hands and they get you in and then they go, surprise, and they show you, what they've been hiding from you. It's just things that you haven't anticipated. They're generally things that are always there, but also something to keep in mind with costs and budget constraints. is that you don't need everything. You don't. You really don't. And sometimes when my couples, as a celebrant, they can get stressed and they often tell me, Camille, we feel like we're so far behind. And so I check off, the important bits. You've got somewhere to be. You've got a venue, places that are going to host your ceremony and your reception. Yes? And they go, yeah, yeah. You've got someone to make that legal. Yes, Camille, that's you. Awesome, awesome. You want some photos? Yes. Oh, yeah, we've got our photographer. Great. And you've got some food being served to your guests. Yes. And drinks, of course. Right. Okay. Everything else is trimming. Everything else is icing on the cake, so to speak. And so from there, you can pick what and who you value the most and only put in the things that actually mean something to you, that you actually want, that you think are good value. So balancing your desires with your budget limitations is really important. Don't lose sight of what the essentials are. Another stressing factor can be time management. So, as I mentioned, while the average might be 12 months of planning, if you're going to compact that timeline and have a wedding before, in 6 months, in 8 months, planning that with daily life and work because you were plenty busy before you're engaged, right? And now you've decided, especially if you don't have a wedding planner, to put wedding planner on your CV and off you go. Those with full-time jobs are going to find it very, very hard to be a full-time wedding planner as well. And that is something that I think a lot of people underestimate. If you don't have a structured timeline, if you don't use planning tools, this is also going to impact on the pressure that you're feeling. Then there are the emotional pressures. So navigating your family dynamics and the opinions that come with them, God love them, can be hard. It can be really hard. Not only are these people coming at you with what and how they believe your wedding should, be progressing like, commonly there's opposing opinions. So if you take one family member's side on a particular, it could be colours. One family member says you should have this colour and you go, I think you're right, we should. Then you tell another family member and they go, oh no, the absolute opposite. You should have the absolute opposite colour. By choosing one of those colours, you're essentially dividing your family as well. And that sort of people-pleasing pressure can really get you down. It's the emotional strain of trying to please everyone because you're not going to. If there are communication issues like misalignment between your vision and your expectations, it could be you and your fiancé, it could be both of your vision, you could be rock solid as a couple, but then your budget and your family or friends' expectations or even the venue that you've chosen, they could turn around and go, actually, no, you can't have whatever it is that you thought you might be able to have. Let's say it's a live band until midnight. Oh, no, we have to be all packed up by 10 o'clock. And that can be really hard when you discover that one of your non-negotiables, one of the things that you wanted most, is not possible. It can break your heart. And the conflict that comes from different priorities and preferences. Remember, like in business corporate speak, we're called stakeholders. We're the stakeholders of a wedding. We've got the couple who are getting married, primary, of course, but then their immediate family, pretty important. All the vendors who contribute to it, equally important. They've all got to come together to make this thing happen. This is where the differing opinions can come from and hence conflict. Okay, so we know how wedding burnout shows up. We know why we're suffering from wedding burnout. So now we've got to work out what the hell we can do about it. I want you to reclaim your wedding day and use some of these strategies for beating the burnout. The first thing that we need to look at is to reassess your core needs. And this is just getting back to why. Why are you doing this thing in the first place? What's it all about? This is revisiting your initial vision and your priorities for your wedding. Focus on what truly matters to the both of you. Is it meaningful moments, like a first look, like seeing each other down the aisle, like your first dance? Is it your guest's experience? Is it bringing everyone together? Is the food the highlight? Is your band the highlight? Remember, go back to the start, go back to your planning, work it out. There shouldn't be any more than 3 highlights there. You want to simplify it. You want to eliminate non-essential elements that don't align with your values because you can only focus on so much. And this burnout is generally an indication that you're dealing with too much. So we're going to restrict your focus. Let's face facts. You've always been the planner and the organizer. And your fiancé's eyes glaze over a little when you start talking about the details of your wedding day. But you really need someone to share this all with, to bounce ideas off, and someone who's not going to ruin the surprises, but also be supportive and maybe even offer a different perspective. So when you're needing to get a second opinion about your bridesmaid, your in-laws, or your first dance song, Unbridely Couples is your safe space. Unbridely hosts a private Facebook community where modern engaged couples can share ideas, chat, and solve problems, and generally just get freaking excited about their wedding. We also have a curated list of experienced wedding vendor professionals in there to offer suggestions and tips, insight into how to get the most out of your big day. But with no unsolicited DMs or pushy sales tactics, it's just not what Unbridely is about. So you can search for the Unbridely Couples group on Facebook or just click on the link in the show notes. I'll see you in there. Another strategy that some people recommend is just taking a break from wedding planning. So you could plan it out in the diary if you want. You can tell your closest friends and family, but you will need to schedule regular, no wedding talk days. Just live. Just don't answer the emails. Don't answer your phone to the wedding vendors. Take time to enjoy being around your fiancé like you used to. Do things that don't involve cake tasting, colour palette picking, contract signing, fittings. Engage in activities that you enjoy as a couple, way outside of planning, and use the break to recharge yourselves. Gain a fresh perspective. Remember, it's about you two. Another way to get some of the load out of your head is to delegate tasks. And by having everything down, by organizing yourself, having everything, whether you're a pen and paper kind of person, whether you use apps, there are tasks that can be handled by family, friends, or professionals. And if you clearly communicate what you expect and the responsibilities to those that are helping, it will lighten your shoulders. You need to also trust other people to execute their tasks without micromanaging. Otherwise, it defies the whole purpose. And in that vein, getting professional help, considering hiring a wedding planner or coordinator for expert guidance is going to make the world of difference to you. Utilizing vendor networks. So if you've only hired one vendor, if you've only hired, booked in your venue, you can go to them. You can ask for recommendations for other wedding vendors, your photographer, a great DJ, a great cake maker, and you can ask them for help with problem solving. They're going to shortcut your learning curve if you're doing all of this on your own. And also, as I mentioned, take advantage of professional tools and resources where you can, because it's going to make you more efficient. Having everything swirling around in your head is very circular. The list does not go on forever. It's finite. But chances are you haven't done this before, and so you don't know where it begins and where it ends, which is where a lot of the overwhelm can come from. So if there are any tools that you love, whether it be the Knot, whether it be websites or something similar, get your checklists. If it makes you feel better, check them off. Make sure that you're not repeating yourself and going back over things more than once. And one of the hardest things to do, but one of the most important lessons from wedding planning, is learning how to deal with overbearing opinions diplomatically. We don't have to ruin our relationships by asserting what we want. So practicing our assertive communication is acknowledging people's input. Thanks for that. Really appreciate that. But then standing firm on your choices. It could be something like, we've actually got that covered, but thank you again. Or we've decided not to do that, but thank you again. Setting boundaries, letting others know when their input is welcome and when it's not, and using I statements to express how their comments affect you and your plans. When you say or do this, I feel X, Y, and Z. So an example could be when you ask to invite your girlfriend who I haven't met to our wedding, I felt like you didn't respect my fiancé and my decision on the guest list. Or maybe when you RSVP to our wedding late and then asked to have a +1, I felt like you didn't respect our wedding, weren't excited for it, and then didn't understand that our final numbers were due 3 weeks ago. Fairly non-emotional, very factual. A lot of people can't do it in real life. I can say it here to you on a podcast. It's really hard to do, but learning how to do that is learning how to become a new family. You and your fiancé are going to become a new family. You're going to want to put each other first, and this is your practice. So some extra tips for managing your wedding planning stress are to create a realistic timeline. While you might have been engaged 6 months ago and you've only got 6 months to go, what you want to do is create a realistic timeline for these last 6 months, for example. So it's breaking down the planning process into manageable phases so everything doesn't happen in a month. But likewise, it doesn't mean that you procrastinate for 5 months and do everything in the last month. It's not going to work. Break it down. Work out where and when things need to happen. And if it helps you to draw it out on a bit of paper, do it. If it helps on an Excel spreadsheet, if you want to create a digital timeline, whatever it takes, however you process information, it is an excellent practice to have it written down and have both you and your fiancé see it and go, right, this is what we're up against. What part are you going to take on? What part should I take on? Let's achieve this. And setting deadlines that are actually going to happen to give you the impetus to avoid procrastination. Setting something unachievable is going to be your first mistake. So make sure if you've got a particularly busy week at work, if there's other deadlines that are required for you to keep your job, that's got priority. So maybe the deadline for choosing the menu, maybe you could put that the week after or the week before. Make it realistic so you've actually got a hope in hell of making it happen. Mindfulness, another tip, is about you. Mindfulness and self-care are not just buzzwords for fun. Incorporating stress-relieving techniques like exercise, a walk of the dog, a game of tennis, some meditation. What's your favorite hobby? It kind of doesn't matter what it is. If it is an activity where you lose yourself, one of those where you go, oh gosh, time's just flown, that's your stress relieving technique. Do it more. Do it more often. Put it in your calendar if you need to. Put it in your diary. Make sure it's incorporated into your day. Make sure that you are a priority. Self-care routines that maintain your physical and mental well-being might include just having more meals at home, not having as much takeaway. It might be getting a meal delivery service for a month or so. So then you do have the time to focus on other things, but making sure that your nutrition's in check, your exercise is in check, your mental health is ticking along. You're feeding yourself the good stuff in food, water, exercise, who you're talking to, who you're sharing this with. My recommendation is as few people as possible should have any insight into your wedding, because the more people that hear about your plans, the more people will potentially not like them, tell you that it's wrong, decide it's just not the way things are done. It doesn't matter what their opinion is. You know what yours is. Stick with it. Protect it. Another tip is communicating with your fiancé. So scheduling regular check-ins, that even needs to be scheduled in, whether it's a week, every fortnight, something like that, once a month, whatever. But writing it down and going, we're going to catch up about the wedding on this time. And it might not be the most thrilling thing. So you could do it over dinner, do it over a board game, a computer game, chat over coffee, chat at the bar, whatever you need to make you both open to discussing your feelings, the planning progress, what has to happen next. Don't wear this on your own, and practice active listening, and make sure that you're compromising to resolve any petty disagreements and utilizing technology. So if you're of a tech mindset, I highly recommend using planning apps and tools to organize yourself, and also for communication. I think websites is amazing, not just for their wedding website capabilities, but even more so for their planning checklists and the notifications you get, the budgeting, the communication tools. It's going to help you to keep things streamlined. It's going to help you to not forget things. And you can then take them out of your head. It's not clogging up your everyday life. And make sure you keep email or digital records of everything you agree to and book to streamline the processes for sure, to have evidence of what has been agreed to, and also to reduce the likelihood that you'll get buried in paperwork. Piles of paper lying around, massive folders full of stuff. The clutter can really affect how you're thinking about your wedding. As I mentioned at the start, there is one extreme measure that you could take when you're feeling yourself suffering from wedding planning burnout. And it is essentially to draw a line in the sand and decide no more. You could just choose to put everything from that moment on into what's known as the fuck it bucket. And that is a place you could make it physically if you want. You could have a little bucket. I imagine like a little metal pail, and it says fuck it on it. And you could put things in there. So the next opinion that comes your way that doesn't help you, serve you, bring you any value, you can put it in there. Someone says, can we bring our 4 kids to the wedding even though it's a kids-free wedding? Nah, sorry, it goes in the fuck it bucket. When your photographer cancels, it might be a case of, okay, photographer, you find someone else then, and you deflect and you put it in the fuck it bucket. People asking to be invited, bridesmaid who hasn't gone and gotten her dress, fuck it bucket. You could just let the whole thing go. And as I said, it's a pretty extreme direction to take, but if you're truly buried under it, it might be very, very freeing to you. But I think for most people that the middle ground will be good. Some things could go in that bucket, certainly. Some things will need to be dealt with, compromises, things like that. And other things, I believe, you could just let slide off your back, knowing that the most important things on your wedding day are going to be taken care of. And just to finish off, here are a couple of pearls of wisdom from past couples who felt the pressure and stress of wedding burnout and what they did about it. I'm going to quote this one. They say, "Now looking back on it, I wish I hadn't worried or stressed so much about the wedding planning, because so many of the little things that get you down in the planning phase don't even matter the day of." And this one, I love this one. "I got to a point where I had to be realistic and make some compromises, cut some stuff that was just causing me more stress than it would have added value to the day. The key thing my fiancé reminded me of when we were getting sucked into the detail was, will this add value to people's experience of the day? E.g., are they actually going to remember it?" And I think these things are really important to keep in mind. If you're suffering from wedding burnout, or if you have in the past and you're like these couples who have been through it and have a little bit of knowledge that you could share, a little bit of help that you could give, please give me a DM. I'm at Unbridely on Instagram, or you can email me hello@unbridely.com pretty much any old time. I'd love to hear from you. Chat soon. That about wraps it up for this episode of the Unbridely podcast. For the links and resources we mentioned, please head to the show notes. And if you love the show, please review and subscribe on the podcast platform you're on now so you don't miss out on a single episode. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, weddings are a team sport. Catch you soon.